My name is Daniel Whitaker. I'm 52 years old, and I live in the state of Missouri. What I'm about to tell you happened when I was 26, but even today, every time I think about it, I feel that cold shiver crawling up my spine. Michael Taylor was an ordinary man. He lived in the neighboring town, had a wife named Claire, and led a simple life. He worked fixing roofs and was known for being a quiet guy who rarely got into trouble. If someone had asked me about him before all this happened, I would have said he was one of those people who just blended into the background. But in the months leading up to that night, strange stories started circulating about him. It all began when Michael and Claire started attending a religious group that held intense healing and deliverance sessions. It wasn't a regular church, and many people in the community already looked at it with suspicion. The group believed that evil was always lurking, infiltrating people's lives, and that only through rigorous exorcism rituals and prayers could one be freed from it. Some people said the gatherings felt more like a spiritual battle than a normal service. At first, Claire said the sessions were helping Michael. He was more focused, seemed more energized about life. But over time, something changed. He started acting strangely, growing more and more paranoid. He said he saw shadows moving inside the house, felt invisible hands touching his shoulders while he slept. He began waking up in the middle of the night screaming, his eyes wide open as if he had seen something horrifying. One night, Claire called me in a panic. I was never that close to her, but we knew each other. She said Michael was having a breakdown, speaking in a language she couldn't understand and wouldn't let anyone near him. She told me he would stare at the mirror for hours, mumbling to himself as if arguing with someone who wasn't there. Shortly after that, even his closest friends started avoiding him. He would show up at the gatherings more and more agitated, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a distant look. One of the pastors tried to intervene, saying Michael needed to rest, that maybe he was taking things too seriously. But he wouldn't listen. He said he could feel something inside him, something that was trying to get out. Things completely spiraled out of control when the group decided Michael needed an exorcism. Hearing this today, it sounds like something out of a movie, but back then, in those circumstances, it seemed like the only option. The ritual took place in a back room of the church, with only a few people present. It lasted over 6 hours. During that time, Michael screamed, thrashed, spat on the floor, and said they would never be able to drive it out. In the end, he collapsed on the floor, trembling, and went completely still. A lot of people thought it ended there. But that same night, when Michael went home, that was when everything truly fell apart. It was past midnight when the police received a frantic call from a neighbor. They said they heard screams coming from Michael and Claire's house. When officers arrived, they found the front door slightly open. The house was dark, silent. On the living room floor, Michael was kneeling, covered in blood, breathing heavily. His face was empty, like there was nothing left of him inside. He looked up at the officers and said just one sentence: "They're gone." No one ever really understood exactly what happened that night. Michael was arrested but was never able to give a coherent explanation. He just kept repeating that the demons had left, that he was free now. But when people looked at him, they didn't see a free man, just a broken one. The town was never the same after that. Many people who attended that religious group stopped going. Others said it was all nonsense, that Michael had simply lost his mind. But I still wonder to this day, what if he was right? My name is Malcolm Turner. I'm 54 years old, and I live in Scranton, Pennsylvania. What I'm about to share happened in 1986, when I was 17 and living in West Pittston with my family. I was never the type to believe in supernatural things, but what we experienced in that house changed my mind. To this day, whenever I think about it, I get that weird chill down my spine, like something is still watching me. We moved into that house at the beginning of summer. It was an old 2-story home with a cramped basement and an attic that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. My parents, Richard and Linda, were excited because they got a good deal on it, and for them, that was all that mattered. But within the first few days, strange things started happening. At first, it was subtle, almost easy to brush off. objects shifting places, light bulbs burning out for no reason, and sometimes the awful smell of something rotten filling the living room out of nowhere. I remember one night in particular. I had stayed up late playing video games in my room, and when I finally turned everything off and lay down, I heard footsteps in the hallway. They weren't heavy or hurried, but they paced back and forth right in front of my door. At first, I thought it was my little sister, Emily, heading to the bathroom, so I didn't pay much attention. But when the steps stopped right outside my door and stayed there for too long, I started feeling uneasy. I whispered, "Emily?" Nothing. I got up, walked to the door and slowly opened it. The hallway was dark, except for a small lamp glowing at the far end near my parents' room. No one was there. But what made my blood run cold was the smell. That same awful stench, like rotting meat, like something was decaying right there, just a few feet away. I covered my nose and went straight to my parents' room. My dad opened the door, half asleep, and I just said, "There's something here." That night, my dad checked the whole house but found nothing. My mom kept insisting it was probably a dead rat in the walls, but this smell would come and go with no explanation. It was like it would appear out of nowhere, linger for a few minutes and then vanish completely. It kept happening over and over in the following weeks, and that wasn't all. My mom started hearing whispers when she was home alone. My dad, the biggest skeptic of us all, swore he could feel the bed shaking slightly at night. Emily would wake up crying, saying someone was calling her name right next to her bed. But for me, the worst thing happened in the basement. I never liked that place. The ceiling was low, the wooden beams looked old, and the air was thick with dampness. It was the kind of space where you always felt like someone was behind you, even when you knew you were alone. But one day, my dad asked me to go down and grab some boxes we had stored there. As soon as I stepped onto the stairs, I got that strange chill again. The air felt heavier, like I was stepping into a different place entirely. And then I heard it. A sound. Something scratching against the concrete. I froze and looked around, trying to figure out where it was coming from. Then, from behind a pile of boxes, something moved. My heart pounded. I didn't see exactly what it was, but I saw the boxes shift on their own. Something was there. I bolted up the stairs, screaming like an idiot, nearly knocking my mom over in the process. My dad rushed down to check, but of course, he found nothing. He got angry, saying I was letting my imagination get the best of me, but I know what I saw. I know something was down there. After that, things only got worse. The TV would turn on by itself in the middle of the night. Loud banging would echo through the walls, and the feeling of being watched never went away. My mom even brought in a priest to bless the house, but it didn't help. It wasn't until a pair of paranormal investigators came to visit us that we realized how serious this was. They said the house had something old living inside it. Something that didn't want us there. They talked about negative energy, about dark presences, but I didn't need an explanation. I knew. I felt it. We moved out a few months later. My parents never liked talking about it, and we never went back. I tried to forget, to move on, but every time I think about that house, I feel like a piece of it stayed with me, like whatever was there never really let me go. Even now, when I'm alone and everything is quiet, I swear I can still hear those footsteps pacing in the hallway. My name is Travis Mitchell. I'm 42 years old and I live in Rochester, New York. But 20 years ago, I lived for a short time in Amityville with my wife and our 3-year-old daughter. What happened in that house still haunts me, and to this day, I can't explain it. I'm not someone who believes in supernatural things, never have been, but after that experience, I simply can't say those things don't exist anymore. In 2004, we got a great deal on a spacious house in Amityville. The price was way below market value, which should have been a red flag. But at the time, we only thought about the opportunity. The house was big, 2 stories, with a huge backyard and a beautiful view of the canal. My wife Lauren and I thought it would be the perfect place to raise our daughter Emily. The only strange thing was that the realtor avoided talking about the previous owners. After signing the papers, I did some research. The first few days were peaceful. We were excited about the move and focused on organizing everything. But then small things started happening. The first sign that something was wrong came at night. The house had a strange smell, like sulfur mixed with rotting meat. I thought it was a plumbing issue, but the plumbers found nothing. Then came the noises. Not the usual sounds of an old house settling. These were footsteps upstairs when no one was there. Furniture creaking as if someone was sitting down. At fur. Things got worse when Emily started talking to someone who wasn't there. Kids have imaginary friends, so we tried not to make a big deal out of it. But she wasn't just talking to herself, she seemed to be listening to someone and responding. One night, while we were putting her to bed, she looked at the corner of the room and said, "The boy doesn't like you, Daddy." I asked what boy, and she just shook her head and said he didn't want us to stay there. I started feeling constantly watched, especially when I was alone. Once, while working in the office downstairs, I heard a whisper right in my ear. I couldn't make out the words, but it was a raspy, deep voice. I turned quickly, but no one was there. After that, I stopped working alone at night. Lauren also started noticing strange things. One time, she came out of the shower and found all the clothes she had folded and put in the closet scattered across the floor. She thought maybe she had left the window open. The bad smell got worse. It wasn't constant. It would appear suddenly and vanish just as quickly. Our dog, Daisy, started refusing to enter certain rooms. One day, we found her barking furiously at the kitchen wall. It was like she was seeing something we couldn't. And then the voices started. The first time I heard them, I thought it was a neighbor's radio. It was a whisper, repetitive, coming from upstairs. When I went up, the noise stopped. The second time, Lauren heard it too. We were in the living room when we clearly heard a low male voice speaking softly. This time it seemed to come from the hallway. I went to check, but again, nothing. I started losing sleep. I felt exhausted, but every time I tried to sleep, I had the overwhelming sense that something was in the room with us. The worst night came about a month after we moved in. It was late at night, and I woke up to Emily crying. I rushed to her room and found her curled up in the corner of her bed, staring at her closet door, which was wide open. I asked her what was wrong, and she could only say, "He's in there." My blood ran cold. I turned on the light, went to the closet and opened it completely. It was empty, but the horrible smell poured out from inside, so strong it made me gag. I grabbed Emily in my arms and ran back to... That was it. The next morning we decided to stay at a hotel. When we returned to the house to grab some things, we found scratch marks on Emily's bedroom door. They hadn't been there the night before. That was the final straw. We packed our bags and left for good. We never told anyone. We simply put the house up for sale and moved back to Rochester. The new owner bought it without asking any questions. Since then, I've never looked up anything about that house. I don't want to know if someone else went through the same thing. I don't want to know if it was real or just our minds playing tricks on us. All I know is that I never went back to Amityville, and I never will. My name is Daniel Whitaker. I'm 58 years old, and I live in Danbury, Connecticut. I'm going to tell you about something that happened to me in 1981 and still haunts me. I don't like talking about it, but lately, with everything I've been seeing on the internet, I feel like I need to share it. Maybe someone can tell me that I'm not crazy, that it really happened. The problem is, deep down, I don't know if I want that confirmation. That year, I was 16 and living in Brookfield, a small, quiet town. Everyone knew each other, and weird things just didn't happen there. But everything changed when my older brother Mark started working for the Adams family, who lived in an isolated house in the middle of the woods. He did small repairs, chopped wood, and helped the father, Robert Adams, with whatever was needed. The house was old, a bit run down, and I always felt something was off about it. My mom didn't like Mark spending so much time there, but he said the pay was good. The youngest Adams boy, Benjamin, was a strange kid. He was 11, barely spoke, and always seemed scared of something. We heard rumors that he had health problems, but we never knew for sure. All I know is that, after a while, Mark started coming home different. First, he stopped sleeping properly. Then, he began talking about things he saw in the Adams house, things that shouldn't be there. He said that sometimes he heard voices at night. even when everyone was asleep. Once, he mentioned seeing Benjamin talking to himself in the basement, as if he were having a full conversation. At first, we thought he was just tired or spooked by some story, but then he started getting aggressive. One day, he smashed a plate at the dinner table for no reason, and when my dad asked him what was going on, he laughed. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was strange, like it wasn't really his. My mom was terrified and wanted to take him to a doctor, but Mark refused. "I'm fine," he kept saying, but he wasn't. The night everything went out of control, I woke up to a noise coming from his room, a low sound like someone murmuring. I went over and saw the worst thing of my life. Mark was sitting on the edge of his bed, rocking back and forth. He was whispering something I couldn't understand, but that wasn't what scared me. What made me freeze was that he was staring right at me, but his eyes, they didn't look like his. They were dark, sunken, like he wasn't really there. I tried talking to him, but the second I opened my mouth, he stood up so fast I barely saw it. I swear, for a split second, he looked too tall, like he had grown right in front of me. Then he lunged at me, shoving me against the wall. I screamed, and my mom appeared, turning on the light. Mark was standing in the middle of the room, breathing heavily, staring at me. But then, out of nowhere, he collapsed. We called a doctor, but he said it was just exhaustion. My mom didn't believe it and insisted on having a priest come to our house. He arrived the next day and tried to pray for Mark, but my brother started laughing again, that awful laugh. The priest didn't say anything. He just left after blessing the house. That night, Mark disappeared. The police found him 2 days later, wandering in the forest near the Adams house. He was covered in scratches and shaking uncontrollably. When they asked what happened, all he said was, he wanted to come out. He wanted to come out. After that, he was never the same. He never told us what he saw in that house, never talked about what happened. Mark died in 1997 in a car accident. I never brought this up with him, and maybe that's for the best. But even today, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that he's still there, standing in the corner of my room, watching me. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like to support the community. And if you're not subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new content. See you next time.